It was just another Sunday afternoon at my mom's birthday party, the kind of gathering that feels like it could be any family's backyard in suburban America. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and my mom's signature fruit tart, the one she'd whip up to seem effortlessly classy. My dad was in his usual spot by the grill, spinning one of his worn-out stories about back in the day to anyone who'd listen, while my sister Bianca fluttered around with a bundle of dollar store balloons, pretending she hadn't been screaming at her kids that morning. My 10-year-old daughter, Freya, was off somewhere, probably lost in a book or chasing fireflies. Everything felt so normal: cupcakes on the table, cheap chardonnay in plastic cups, and that familiar hum of family chatter. I was just coasting through it, smiling on cue, keeping things light, like I always did. Looking back, I kick myself for not sensing the storm brewing beneath the surface. How could I miss it? The laughs, the clinking glasses, the easy rhythm, it all seemed so safe. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket, and Freya's name lit up the screen. That's when everything changed. The birthday party was humming along, a predictable slice of suburban life in my parents' backyard. I was sipping on lukewarm chardonnay, nodding through my dad's latest retelling of his hard times in the 80s saga, when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my jeans. I glanced at the screen, expecting maybe a spam call or a text from a friend. But Freya's name stared back at me. My 10-year-old daughter, who was probably curled up somewhere in the house with a book or sketching wolves in her notebook, never called me. If she needed me, she'd just tug on my sleeve or holler from across the room. My stomach did a little flip, not quite panic but close enough to make my fingers fumble as I swiped to answer. "Hey, sweetie. What's up?" I said, keeping my voice light, like I was asking if she wanted more cupcakes. Her response hit me like a freight train. "Get out now," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. I froze, the plastic cup in my hand suddenly feeling like it weighed a ton. The chatter around me, my mom's laugh, the clink of plates, Bianca's kids shrieking faded into a dull hum. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loud might break something fragile. "Just get out of the house, please, right now," Freya said again, her words sharp and urgent, like she was holding back a scream. I didn't ask for details. Something in her voice, raw, unshakable fear, flipped a switch in me. My legs moved before my brain caught up, carrying me through the living room, past the snack table piled with half-eaten sandwiches and my mom's prized fruit tart. I didn't look at her, didn't catch her bright smile or my dad's raised eyebrow as I brushed by. I didn't even grab my shoes, just pushed open the front door and stepped into the warm August air, the scent of cut grass and my mom's cheap perfume lingering like a ghost. My heart was pounding, a chaotic drumbeat in my chest, as my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Was Freya hurt? Had someone yelled at her? Was there a stranger in the house? The possibilities spun like a carousel, each one darker than the last. But I kept moving, my bare feet slapping against the concrete path to the driveway, and there she was. Freya stood by the edge of the lawn, her small frame rigid, her backpack slung over one shoulder like she was ready to bolt. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and unblinking, but she wasn't crying. That scared me more than if she had been. My daughter, who could laugh through a scraped knee or a bad day at school, looked like she'd seen something that hollowed her out. For a split second, my heart actually stopped, like the world had hit pause. Then I was running, closing the distance between us, my voice tumbling out in a rush. "Freya, what's going on? Are you okay? What happened?" She didn't move, just clutched the strap of her backpack tighter, her knuckles pale. "I don't want to talk here," she said, her voice low but firm, like she'd made up her mind about something bigger than both of us. "Just get in the car. Can we go?" I scanned her face, her hands, her posture, searching for any sign of injury, any clue to what had spooked her. She looked unharmed, but her eyes, those big, hazel eyes that usually sparkled with mischief, were dull, like someone had turned off the light inside her. "Did someone hurt you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Did someone say something to you?" She shook her head, quick and sharp. "No, not exactly. Just, please, let's go." I nodded, my throat too tight to argue. I turned, unlocked the car, and slid into the driver's seat, Freya climbing in beside me. We pulled away from the house in silence, the kind that feels heavy, like it's carrying the weight of something unsaid. I kept my hands glued to the steering wheel, gripping it like it could anchor me to reality while my brain churned through worst-case scenarios. Had someone threatened her? Was it one of Bianca's kids? My mom? My dad? Every idea was uglier than the one before, but Freya just stared out the window, her small hands folded in her lap, giving me nothing to work with. A few blocks away, I pulled into the empty parking lot of an old garden center, its faded sign and overgrown planters giving it a forgotten, eerie vibe. I turned off the engine and let the silence settle, heavy as fog. "Okay," I said softly, turning to her. "We're alone now. You can tell me what happened." She didn't answer right away, just kept staring straight ahead, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. My heart was still racing, but I forced myself to stay calm, to give her space. Finally, she spoke, her voice flat, like she was reading a script she'd rehearsed in her head. "I don't want to go back. Not to Grandma's, not to Grandpa's, not to that house, not ever again." The words landed like a punch, knocking the air out of me. I opened my mouth to ask why, to beg for an explanation, but nothing came out. She wasn't angry, wasn't dramatic, just certain, in a way that made my skin prickle. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely audible. "I thought everything was fine. What happened?" She shook her head, a small, stubborn motion. "Please don't make me go back," she said, and that was it. I sat there, staring at the cracked dashboard, trying to piece together a puzzle when I didn't even have the edges. My daughter, my fearless, funny Freya, was scared of something she couldn't or wouldn't name. And I'd missed it. I'd been floating through that party, smiling like an idiot, while something had shaken her world to its core. "I won't," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "I won't take you back there." We sat in that parking lot for what felt like hours, the silence stretching between us, thick with questions I didn't know how to ask. I kept replaying the day in my head, the cupcakes, the balloons, the easy laughter, searching for a crack, a moment I'd overlooked. But I had nothing. That's what terrified me most. I'd lived in that house, grown up with those people, thought I knew them inside and out. And yet, Freya had seen something that made her run, something that made her voice shake like it was carrying the weight of our lives. I glanced at her, her small frame curled against the car door, and I knew one thing for certain. Whatever had happened, I'd burn the world down before I let it touch her again. The car sat still in the deserted parking lot of the old garden center, its faded sign looming like a relic from another time. The engine was off, and the silence between Freya and me was so thick it felt like it could choke us. My hands gripped the steering wheel, not because I was going anywhere, but because I needed something solid to hold onto while my world tilted. Freya stared straight ahead, her small hands twisting the straps of her backpack, her face pale and resolute. I'd promised her we wouldn't go back to my parents' house, but I still didn't know why. My voice felt fragile, like it might crack if I pushed too hard, but I had to ask. "Freya, honey," I said softly, leaning toward her, "can you tell me what happened? Why don't you want to go back?" She didn't answer right away, and for a moment, I thought she might not at all. Then she took a breath, sharp and shallow, and her words came out like they'd been locked inside her for hours, waiting for a safe place to land. "I heard them," she said, her voice low but steady. "Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Bianca. They were talking in the kitchen. I was in the bathroom, and they didn't know I could hear." I felt my stomach drop, like I'd missed a step going downstairs. "What did they say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. Freya's eyes stayed fixed on the windshield, like she was seeing the scene play out again. "They said they're going to send me back to Dad," she said, her words slicing through the air. "They think I'd be better off with him. They're planning something to make you lose me." My breath caught, and the world seemed to blur around the edges. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Freya kept going, her voice flat, like she was reporting the weather. "They said you'd lose custody anyway, that they could help it happen faster. They said Dad would take better care of me, and if I went back to him, you'd go back to your old job. You'd start helping them again." She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. "They even talked about putting something in your stuffed drugs, maybe so it'd look bad. So child services would take me away." The words hit me like a sledgehammer, each one heavier than the last. My parents, my own parents, and my sister, plotting to rip my daughter away from me, to hand her back to Vincent, the man who'd thrown a bottle across a room and made her flinch. All so they could get back to their comfortable lives, funded by the money I used to send them. I felt like I was drowning, my chest tight, my mind scrambling to process the betrayal. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, clinging to the hope that she'd misheard, that this was some childish misunderstanding. Freya turned to me then, her hazel eyes sharp and unyielding. "They said it, Mom. They said I'm too much. That I never stopped talking. That the house was nicer before we came. They said you're not useful anymore, and Dad was always the better parent." Her voice didn't waver, but her hands trembled, betraying the fear she was trying to hide. I stared at her, at the backpack she'd packed in a hurry, at the way she'd remembered to grab my phone charger, and something inside me broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a crack spreading through glass. I wanted to scream, to cry, to drive back to that house and demand answers, but I couldn't. Not with Freya sitting there, her small body curled into the passenger seat, trusting me to keep her safe. The weight of her words settled into me, heavy and cold. My parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd clapped when I got my first job at 16, who'd taken my money for years, were ready to frame me, to plant drugs, to destroy my life so they could keep their vacations and their espresso machine. And Bianca, my sister, who'd always gotten a free pass while I carried the family's burdens, was in on it too. I felt like I'd been gutted, like everything I'd known about family had been a lie. I looked at Freya, her face pale but determined, and I realized she'd seen the truth before I did. She'd heard their whispers through the bathroom tiles, their cold calculations, and she'd acted, protecting us both when I was too blind to see the danger. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice thick with tears I wouldn't let fall. "You shouldn't have had to hear that." Freya just nodded, her lips pressed tight, and I knew she wasn't ready to talk more. I wasn't either. My mind was a storm of rage and grief, but one thought cut through the chaos. We weren't going back. Not to that house. Not to those people. Not to the life where I'd been too naive to see the knives behind their smiles. "We need to go somewhere safe," I said, more to myself than to her. Freya didn't respond, but her hand reached for mine, small and warm, and squeezed. I started the car, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel, and drove toward the only place I could think of: Chris's house. My best friend since we were kids, the guy who'd always been there, no questions asked, with a couch and a coffee pot and a heart bigger than he'd ever admit. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced at Freya, her backpack clutched to her chest, and made a silent vow: no one would hurt her again. Not Vincent. Not my parents. Not anyone. We were done with that house, done with their lies, and I'd fight like hell to keep us free. As the car rolled away from the garden center's empty lot, Freya silent in the passenger seat, my mind started to unravel, pulling me back to the years that had led us here. The betrayal I'd just learned about, my parents and sister plotting to hand Freya over to her abusive father, felt like a knife, but the roots of it ran deep, tangled in a past I'd tried to bury. Growing up as the eldest daughter in our family wasn't the golden ticket people might think. It wasn't about leadership or favoritism. It was about being the guinea pig, the one who carried the weight so everyone else could float. By 15, I was working at a local bakery in our small Ohio town, scrubbing counters and boxing up donuts after school. My parents clapped when I got the job, not out of pride, but because it meant I could chip in for the electric bill. "We all contribute," my mom would say, brushing off my teenage pleas for a new pair of jeans. By 16, I was handing over half my paycheck, picking up extra shifts nobody asked me to take. I told myself it was noble, that I was helping the family, that it made me mature. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Bianca, hit the same age and got a free pass, sleeping in, hanging out at the mall with friends, never once asked to pitch in. When I dared to ask my mom why, she shrugged and said, "She's just not built like you," as if I was a workhorse and Bianca was a glass figurine. I swallowed it, kept my head down, and told myself I wasn't petty enough to make a fuss. Then came Vincent, my husband, too young, too fast, but I thought it was love. He was charming in that quiet, easygoing way that made you think he'd roll with anything. We got married at 22, and for a while, it felt like the American dream: a small apartment, a decent job for me, and Freya, our bright-eyed baby girl, born a year later. I worked long hours at a marketing firm, climbing the ladder, earning enough to keep us comfortable. Vincent worked part-time, saying he wanted to be there for Freya, that I was better at the career stuff. I bought it, didn't question it, didn't see how the balance was tipping until it was too late. Slowly, his charm faded. He got short-tempered, withdrawn, his voice sharp enough to cut. It wasn't bruises or fists, not yet, but it was shouting. Slamming doors, long silences that felt like walking on cracked ice. Freya started to feel it too, her laughter quieter, her eyes darting when he raised his voice. Then came the bottle. He threw it across the kitchen one night, not at anyone, he swore, but it shattered in the hallway where Freya stood, clutching her favorite mug. She flinched. The mug hit the floor, and something in me snapped. I packed a bag for us that night, took Freya, and walked out, leaving behind the life I'd built and the man I thought I knew. Going back to my parents' house felt like admitting defeat, but I had nowhere else to turn. Freya was 5 then, still waking up from nightmares about her dad's shouting. I gave up my job. There was no way to juggle the hours with court hearings, therapy for Freya, and school drop-offs. In my line of work, part-time was a fantasy, so I settled for a low-paying gig at a local office, barely enough to cover groceries, let alone dreams. My parents took us in, but it wasn't the warm homecoming I'd hoped for. I'd spent years being their golden goose, sending checks every month, covering their car payments, even footing the bill for their week-long Portugal vacation 2 summers ago. They'd gush about that trip like it was their life's peak, never mentioning who paid for it. But when my money dried up, so did their warmth. My mom sighed over the grocery bill, my dad grumbled about the water bill twice a week, and I started noticing how Freya's drawings disappeared from the fridge, how her plate was cleared before she was done eating. Bianca and her husband lived there too, their 2 toddlers tearing through the house like tiny tornadoes, yet my parents doted on them, babysat, bragged about them. I thought, if Bianca's circus could stay, surely Freya and I could too. But it never felt right. Freya clung to me more, stopped playing downstairs, asked when we'd get our own place. I promised her it was temporary, that family was supposed to help. I believed it until that phone call in the middle of my mom's birthday party. Sitting in the car now, Freya's words echoing in my head, I saw it all clearly. My parents hadn't just taken me in. They'd been banking on me getting back on my feet, back to my old job, back to funding their lives. When I couldn't, they turned on me, ready to sacrifice Freya to get what they wanted. The betrayal wasn't new, it was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. I glanced at Freya, her small hands still clutching her backpack, and felt a surge of guilt for not seeing it sooner. I'd grown up in that house, thought I knew its rhythms, its people. But Freya, my 10-year-old, had seen the truth first, heard their whispers through the bathroom walls, and saved us both. As I started the car, heading toward Chris's place, the only safe harbor I could think of, I knew there was no going back. Not to that house, not to those people, not to the version of me who thought family meant loyalty. The morning after Freya's bombshell in the parking lot, I woke up on Chris's lumpy couch, my neck stiff and my mind still reeling. Freya was curled up next to me, her wolf plushie tucked under her arm, and I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together how my life had unraveled in a single afternoon. My parents and Bianca had planned to frame me, to plant drugs and hand Freya over to Vincent, all to claw back the lifestyle I'd once funded. The betrayal was a raw wound, but there was no time to process it. I had to protect Freya, and that meant facing the storm head-on. By noon, I was standing at the school gate, dropping Freya off, when I saw them, my parents, waiting like sentinels with their reusable tote bags and fake smiles. They looked like they'd been rehearsing their lines all night. "Where have you been?" My mom snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, no trace of warmth or worry. My dad chimed in, "We've been calling you. You disappeared with her." I felt my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't disappear," I said, stepping closer. "I took Freya away from a house where you were plotting to destroy us." "She heard you, Mom, in the kitchen, talking about planting drugs, about giving her to Vincent so I'd lose custody." My mom's face went pale, a flush creeping up her neck. "That's ridiculous," she stammered. She must have misunderstood. I didn't flinch. "She heard you say I'm not useful anymore, that Vincent's the better parent. You wanted me out so you could get your checks back." My dad opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You housed me after I paid your bills for years, after I sent you to Portugal. And this is how you repay me." They stood there, speechless, their tote bags sagging like their excuses. I turned and walked away, Freya's small hand in mine, knowing that confrontation was just the start. The custody hearing loomed a week later, and I felt like I was walking into a lion's den with Nothing but a flimsy shield. Vincent showed up to court in a stiff suit that looked like it was wearing him, his face all polished charm, the kind that fools people who don't know better. My parents and Bianca sat behind him, their faces tight like they'd rehearsed their loyalty to him in the mirror. Chris was there too, in the back, his half-smile a quiet anchor in the chaos. The courtroom smelled like cheap air freshener, and every sound, the shuffle of papers, the judge's gavel, felt amplified, like it was echoing in my chest. My lawyer, a guy who once wore a flamingo tie to mediation, warned me this would be brutal. My parents took the stand first, painting me as unstable, moody, too sensitive to be a good mom. My mom's voice dripped with fake concern as she said I'd always been emotional, while my dad nodded like he was starring in a documentary about my failures. Bianca piled on, gushing about Vincent's patience, how he'd been such a devoted dad. I sat there, nails digging into my palms, wanting to scream, if he was so great, why did I leave him? But I stayed silent, my heart pounding as their lies stacked up like bricks. Then it was Freya's turn. At 10 years old, she walked to the stand like she was giving a book report, her shoulders squared, her eyes fixed on the judge. I held my breath, terrified for her but proud in a way that made my chest ache. I want to live with my mom, she said, her voice clear and steady. She listens to me. She makes me feel safe. She's never yelled at me. When they asked about Vincent, she paused, her small hands gripping the edge of the stand. He gets angry, she said. He throws things. He threw a bottle once, and it scared me. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Then she dropped the final blow. My grandma and aunt said they wanted me to live with dad. They said they'd put stuff in mom's bag to get her in trouble. I felt the air shift, like the whole courtroom had been slapped. My parents' faces froze and Vincent's jaw tightened. During a break, I saw him grab my mom's wrist, hissing something I couldn't hear. She yanked away, and my dad stepped in, but Vincent stormed off. They didn't return to court after that. My lawyer seized the moment, laying out the evidence like a general on a battlefield. He showed the money trail, how Vincent had funneled cash to my parents, paying for their car, their vacations, their loyalty. It was all there. Receipts, bank statements, proof of his hidden assets from our divorce. My parents withdrew their testimony, their absence louder than any apology they'd never offer. The judge ruled in my favor. Full custody, no visitation, no contact with Vincent. He left the courtroom red-faced and sweating, a man undone by his own schemes. Freya squeezed my hand as we walked out, her small smile worth more than any victory. My parents' betrayal had nearly broken us, but Freya's courage and the truth had set us free. We drove back to Chris's place, the weight of the fight lifting, leaving room for something new, hope, maybe, or at least a chance to breathe. The courtroom victory felt like a weight lifted, but it wasn't the clean kind of relief you see in movies. It was messy, raw, like stepping out of a storm with your clothes soaked and your heart still racing. Freya and I left the courthouse, hand in hand, her small fingers gripping mine, and drove back to Chris's place, where the couch had become our makeshift home. The judge's ruling full custody, no contact with Vincent, was a shield, but it didn't erase the scars. My parents and Bianca had tried to tear us apart, and now they were facing their own reckoning. Word spread fast in our small Ohio town. Friends, cousins, even their bridge club buddies heard about their scheme to frame me and hand Freya over to a man who'd thrown a bottle in her presence. Social media posts vanished, those glossy Portugal vacation photos, the smug captions about family first gone overnight. Their shiny new car disappeared from the driveway, replaced by a beat-up sedan. I heard through the grapevine that they were struggling to pay bills, their lifestyle crumbling without my checks to prop it up. Old friends stopped inviting them to potlucks, and my mom's book club mysteriously forgot her name. It wasn't justice, not exactly, but it was consequence, and I didn't lose sleep over it. Meanwhile, Freya and I were piecing ourselves back together at Chris's house, a cozy 2-bedroom that smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil from his garage projects. Chris, my best friend since we were 10, had always been a constant, the guy who'd show up with a pizza and no questions when life got rough. He didn't push, didn't pry, just handed me a mug of coffee every morning and let Freya raid his snack drawer. I'd always seen him as permanent friend material, the kind of guy who'd eat crayons in 4th grade and still make you laugh about it 20 years later. But something shifted. Maybe it was the way he sat with Freya patiently, listening to her ramble about wolf comics, or how he'd leave a spare toothbrush out for me without making a big deal. One night, over burnt toast and a bottle of cheap wine, he told me he'd liked me for years but never said anything because he didn't want to mess up what we had. I laughed, then stopped when I saw his face earnest, unguarded, like he'd just handed me his heart. He kissed me, and I kissed him back, and suddenly the world made a little more sense. Chris wasn't just a safe harbor. He was home. Freya noticed the change before I did. She'd catch us laughing over dishes or stealing glances during movie nights, and one day she said, "I'm glad Chris is part of our pack." She'd started drawing again, her sketchbook filled with wolves fighting snakes, always ending with, "The wolf curled up safe in a den with her cub." It was her way of processing, of healing, and every new drawing felt like a small victory. She wasn't the same bubbly kid she'd been before Vincent, before my parents' betrayal, but she was coming back to herself. She'd laugh in her sleep sometimes, a soft giggle that made my heart ache with relief. At school, her teachers said she was opening up, raising her hand more, even joining the art club. Chris helped too, building cardboard castles with her on rainy afternoons, and letting her win at Mario Kart exactly half the time. He'd listen to her wild theories about wolf packs like they were gospel, and when she told him she felt safe with him, he cried in the hallway though he'd deny it if I brought it up. I was rebuilding too. A job offer came through, a flexible gig with a small marketing startup that paid well enough to afford groceries and maybe even a vacation someday. It wasn't my old corporate life, but it was mine, and it felt like a step towards something solid. I'd lock myself in Chris's bathroom some days, not to cry, but to laugh big, coughing laughs that felt like shaking off rust. We were still crashing at his place, no lease in sight, but he never hinted we were overstaying. "Stay as long as you need," he'd say, flipping pancakes for Freya while I sipped coffee, and I started to believe him. My parents tried to reach out once, showing up at Chris's door with a stack of pancakes, as if syrup could erase what they'd done. I didn't get a chance to speak. Chris stepped into the hallway, looked them in the eye, and said, "You need to leave." Freya peeked out, nodding like his backup, and they left without a word. That was the last I heard from them. The silence wasn't peace, not yet, but it was space to breathe, to build, to love. Freya and I weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Looking back, the sting of my parents' betrayal still lingers, but it's dulled by the life Freya and I have built. They tried to break us, to trade my daughter's safety for their own comfort, but we came out stronger. Now, I wake up in Chris's cozy Ohio home, where the smell of coffee and Freya's laughter fill the air. She's drawing again, her wolf comics a testament to her healing, and Chris, my unexpected partner, builds cardboard castles with her, his steady presence a gift I never saw coming. Family, I've learned, isn't blood. It's the people who show up when the world falls apart. Freya taught me that, with her fierce courage at 10 years old, and Chris proved it, standing by us through every storm. I still wonder sometimes if I went too far, cutting my parents off completely, or if I should have fought harder to make them see. What do you think? Did I go too far? Or not far enough? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If this story hit home, hit that subscribe button and join our journey. Your support means the world to us.